Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and inhumane. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is Sri Lanka's current health crisis. Where are we heading as a nation? To discuss all this and more, we've invited 5 guests to our studios this evening, and all 5 of them are from the field of medicine. I want to quickly invite them to you today on the show. Joining us this evening on the show are Dr. Vinya Ariratna, President of the Sri Lanka Medical Association, Professor Indika Karunatilaka, Secretary General, Asia Pacific Academic Consortium for Public Health, Dr. Padma Gunaratna, past President of the Sri Lanka Medical Association, Dr. Ashoka Gunaratna, Media Spokesperson, Association of Medical Specialists, as well as Dr. Thinuwan Wickramasinghe, General Committee Member of the GMOA, or the Government Medical Officers Association. So let's get the ball rolling today with Dr. Vinya Ariratna, President of the Sri Lanka Medical Association. Do we have a crisis in Sri Lanka at present in the health sector in the country? Your time starts now.
Yes, good evening and thank you for inviting us for this very important panel discussion. Yes, we are having a serious crisis. I think it's not a singular crisis, it's a polycrisis manifesting in various ways. As we all know, we are very proud of our health system, our public healthcare system. It's a free healthcare system. It's not only that it has been a free healthcare system, but it has also produced results. The outcomes in terms of the status of health of our nation have been manifested in our low infant mortality rate. If you take maternal mortality rate, and even our life expectancy has been very, very high compared to the gross national income of our country. So how did we maintain that? It's because we had a very high quality system that was functioning very equitably. You touched on the aspect of equality and equity. So we are very proud that particularly for the lower segments in terms of socioeconomic status, our system has really served them well. So it has been able to perform very effectively despite problems that existed. Now today what's happening is that there's a serious shortage of medicines on one hand. Then our human resources are also under threat. A lot of doctors are migrating, and other allied health staff are also looking for greener pastures. So we are in a crisis in terms of human resources as well. But more than anything else, right now, as a medical professional and also representing the Apex Medical Professional Association in Sri Lanka, my concern is the lack of trust. The trust that people had on the Sri Lanka health system is now being challenged, and people are getting very worried. They are not going to hospitals for treatment readily because they think that the drugs are of lower quality, and also they are risking their lives. This has never happened despite so many shocks that we have had as a nation and also in the healthcare system. Therefore, it's a collective responsibility to restore the public the trust in the healthcare system. If it deteriorates any further, I think it will be very difficult to resurrect. So the message that we have been giving is that okay, there are serious incidents that have happened, and also there are serious concerns about the quality of medicines, but still don't lose the confidence. If you have a problem that needs medical attention, do not hesitate to seek medical assistance. Have the trust in the government system, but it will not remain like that for a long time unless we fix the problem right now.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Vinya Ariratna, President of the Sri Lanka Medical Association. A very quick question to you, Dr. Vinya. Now, I recollect when I was going to school, we were boasting so much about the public healthcare system in Sri Lanka. You just mentioned about the infant mortality rate, for an example. What is the decline? What happened over the years? Is it because of politicians, or is it because of bureaucrats, or is it because of officials in positions of authority?
I think it's a combination of factors. I would, if I sum up, it's governance. Governance generally in the country, as well as governance in the health system. Earlier we had accountability, and also there was professional ethics very much in our system. Unfortunately, we are struggling now because of resource constraints and so many things. There are sometimes the procedures are not being followed, and sometimes for other reasons, efficiency as well as there's a lot of wastage in our systems. So I think it's a combination of many factors, including misuse of resources or even bordering corruption.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vinyayaratna, President of the Sri Lanka Medical Association. I now move my attention towards Professor Indi Karunatilaka, Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Academic Consortium for Public Health.
Yeah, again, thank you for taking up this very important topic, and I think it's very important and also rather tragic as well, because if you take the health system in this country, is considered as a health system which has used the minimum resources and prioritized them and for the best benefit of the citizens of the country, and has been considered worldwide as a model for less economically privileged countries, that system that has achieved so much. And here I think this system is in crisis, and the key word here is the system. I would look at it in a broader perspective. If you take health, the broader definition of health is actually, it goes beyond just having medicines or treatment. According to WHO, what is meant by health is not just the absence of diseases, but the complete well-being of physically, psychologically, economically and socially. So if you take all these, if you take the current country situation, what has been happening over decades, I think it's in crisis. So all these things are interrelated actually. So it is not one aspect. We talk about social determinants of health. There are so many social factors that would affect the health. For example, if you take the current economic situation, most of the families would find that their income is much less than their basic expenditure, maybe less than the half of the amount required for their basic expenditure. So many families actually now they tend to ignore the health aspect, the education, their well-being. So that itself is a failure in the health system. Now actually if you take the, now we think about the equity, but at the moment the out-of-pocket expenditure is almost 50% of the health expenditure, almost 46%. So this is a huge number. So that means the equity is actually not there anymore. So all these are huge issues. And on the other hand, now we are talking about the current issues. For example, those unfortunate deaths that are happening. There are two ways of looking at it. Sometimes you can just ignore that. If a patient go to a hospital, deaths can happen. So it's normal. So you can just ignore it. On the other hand, there's a tendency to identify a scapegoat. Maybe the person has given the drug, or maybe the hospital, and to blame. I see those both approaches are wrong. What I see is those unfortunate incidents are actually manifestations to see that the health system is in crisis, because in Sri Lanka's health system there are so many checks and balances. So it's rather unusual for things to go wrong, because there are so many checks and balances. So if something to go wrong, for example, a death, you can't say normal, it's a preventable death. A death maybe, if it is probably due to maybe anaphylaxis, probably a preventable death. So that kind of situation to happen, so many things has to go wrong at different time points. It may even maybe at the point where the food was taken and the regulation there, and then at the hospital, how the drug was registered, purchased, what was the decision to give that particular treatment, and then the emergency, now the patient's given correct information, whether the patient was knowledgeable about these side effects, and whether they were able to see the seriousness of the situation. So all these things can happen. And then after the, say, if that kind of emergency happened, were the emergency drugs available? So all these things are there. What I'm trying to say is that there are so many things that can go wrong. So if these kind of things happen, that means the system is in crisis, because there are so many checks and balances.
Very quickly, Professor, you spoke about the deaths, recent deaths that has happened. I want to drag your attention to the issue with regard to the Peradeniya teaching hospital, where a very young girl died as a result of an antibiotic that was given to her. This is not her fault. So the finger should be pointed at someone. Who should we point the finger at?
Okay, that's the very point that I was trying to highlight. These are critical incidents in health situation. So in this situation, they illustrate, they show there is a crisis. When this kind of thing happen, we have to look into all these different time points where errors can happen. This is what we call a Swiss cheese model, where there are different checks and balances within the system, and all these checks and balances can go wrong. So that's why these should create a red light or red alert within us that something is wrong with the system.
But Professor, if you are told to point the finger at someone, who will you point the finger at?
I wouldn't, because again, there are so many points. There are so many points that has gone wrong. That is why a system change is required, a really hard and deep analysis.
So do you think this is because of a corrupt governance system that is in play?
Could be. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, possible.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor.
You can't pinpoint on one aspect.
Right. We'll talk about all this momentarily as we go along. Professor Indi Karunatilaka, Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Academic Consortium for Public Health. Very quickly, Professor, now you also teach aspiring doctors, right? When you see a situation like this in the country, what do you tell them?
Yeah, there are so many learning points from this. I mean, at different time points. I mean, if you take the whole system, health system, there are a lot of things to learn about the preventive health system. There are a lot of things to learn about the empathy. There are a lot of things to learn about the communication skills and explaining the patients, and also about the emergency management. There are so many things to learn from. I mean, these kind of situations. Actually,
we'll talk about all this momentarily, Professor Indika. I now want to move my attention towards Dr. Padma Gunaratna, past president of the Sri Lanka Medical Association. Are we really in a crisis?
Yeah, let me put it in a way that many of us are the products of free education. So just like the free education, free health service is another asset that we all have been enjoying from our childhood. So I think that right at this point of time, the free health is threatened because the people are losing the trust on the system with free health. So now when you say free health, it involves so much of, it's not just distributing medicine, but then there are many health professionals who are involved with this, providing the services, the providers. And the people are pointing finger at health professionals because the people, I mean, what is expected is not being delivered by this health system, which has been, as the way that it was highlighted by Dr. Vinya Aryaratna, which has been thriving, which have been doing so well over so many decades. I mean, when compared with the other countries that are much at a, much higher economical levels. I mean, we were very much par with many of the developed countries previously. So now it has come to a situation that the system is unable to deliver what is expected by the people, and that they are losing the trust. So I see that there are several important points for us to fall into this situation. One is the brain drain, that there are many professionals. It's not only doctors, all the other technical personalities, the other healthcare professionals. There are many reasons why they are to leave. They leave so that we are short of staff. There is shortage of medicines, as well as the quality, safety, and the cost effectiveness of drugs also are very much affected. So even if there is private sector, there are only very small community who could afford this private sector, and even there are so many problems. So therefore that it has come to a sort of a very much miserable situation for people, that they do not know, even for their minimum health needs, where to go and what to need, what to do. So I think that it's the time that we need to consider it as a crisis, and we need to look in, because some of the points that need to be corrected are very, small things. The system is in place, and what it needs is just adhering to the system, and without sabotaging what is already in existence.
Dr. Padma, I want to interrupt you there for a second. Now you say there is a system in place, but
Yes.
we're all aware.
Yes.
In 2021, that a large amount of data, which is amounting to 5,925 files, were deleted from the NMRA system. And this is the time that you were also the head of the Sri Lanka Medical Association. So the process completely became defunct in 2021, isn't it?
Yeah, this is exactly what we are trying to highlight, Now the NMRA has been established to assure the quality, safety and the efficacy of the medicine as well as the devices and other clinical trials that are being conducted and so on. So now there has to be so much of attention and the interest need to be paid on the existence of the NMRA. There is NMRA Act, and then there are many things that need to be adhered with regard to functionality of the NMRA. So now more than we trying to adhere to many of these things, more than we try to establish the system that was, automated system that need to be in existence as the way that you mentioned, what is happening is contradictory.
So everything is happening now manually, is it?
That's right. That's right. So it's impossible for that type of an institute to continue its functions and to deliver the what is expected early and fast if it's been done manually.
So Dr. Padma, just to correct you, just to ask you a question, a follow-up question on that. So do you think we are in this health crisis today because of what we experienced in 2021, where NMRA data amounting to 5,925 files being deleted overnight?
That's one reason, but it may not be the same, the only reason. I mean, as it was highlighted by the President SLMA, it's governance in,
right.
In total. Because if we as individuals do not function genuinely, so no system would work, I think, because the people with vested interest could intervene them.
Right. When you say vested interest, who is that?
There are many. It's they are among us, they are among professionals, they are among politicians, they are among media. It's not one single
because
person.
I want to drag your attention, Dr. Padma, to the statement that was made by Channa Jayasumana, who was the State Minister of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals. He's saying that there is no harm for the data related to registration certificates and licenses. And he makes his statement just after the data was deleted from the NMRA system on September 21st, 2021. So you say that these may also would have contributed to the current health crisis in Sri Lanka, is it?
Definitely, they definitely would have contributed. The reason,
right.
if the automated systems were in existence, the systems would have been transparent and it would have been visible to all, and all would have known what was happening and how the system was working. So these are the areas that needs attention and then that needs correction as well.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Padma Gunrath, the past president of the Sri Lanka Medical Association. Dr. Padma, your phone is ringing, so you need to put it on.
No, it's not.
Someone's phone is ringing. If you can just put your phones on silent or on airplane flight mode, that would be just. Thank you very much. That would be great. So now I move my attention towards Dr. Ashok Gunratna, media spokesperson of the Association of Medical Specialists. What is your take on Sri Lanka's present dilemma?
So firstly, I need to thank you for inviting me for this important discussion. As others already mentioned, we had a very good health system, internationally acclaimed system. In the early 70s, there was what was called Physical Quality of Life Index, the international index, which they took into consideration maternal mortality, infant mortality, and so on and so forth. And Sri Lanka was quite on top, in par with many other countries. And we were a model of low-cost, effective health delivering country. Right. So unfortunately, we have come to what it is now. And the current crisis is more than a crisis, it's complete collapse. And as Vinaya mentioned, we have a huge crisis in human resource in relation to healthcare. When it comes to consultants, specialist care, the attrition rate is never before this. There are certain specialties where the attrition comes almost close to 100%, right? And some 70-80%, which had never been, right? Maximum rates would have been about 30. So we have a huge crisis in human resource right now, right? It may be due to the economic crisis and other things we can discuss later, but that is one. Then the second issue, we have a huge crisis in the quality of medicines. Right? And as Madam Padma said, there are lots of checks and balances. You cannot run any system without checks and balances. That is the one that will regulate and make sure that something falls in a particular line. Now, these checks and balances are being made defunct. Now, one classic example is the NMRA, right? The regulatory authority that is there to regulate, to supervise, to make sure the quality of drugs, are met to a certain standard. So they are not functioning optimally. So that is also one crisis. Then the scarcity of drugs, right? The minister himself says 190 of the 800 drugs are not there with the government. This is not my statement, it's the minister himself. So that is 25% almost of the drugs are not available. And the government is going for emergency purchases, which opens the door for a lot of irregularities. And I can't understand when the petroleum minister in charge of petroleum says that if the sheds don't keep 50% of the stocks, that they are going to cancel the license. But nothing is done for not keeping emergency drugs in the health sector, right? So these are some of the things actually that need to look into and probably contributing to the current crisis in the health sector.
So you mentioned, Dr. Gunaratna, that human resource is also a very big problem when it comes to the current health crisis in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
But let's look at particularly what happened in the recent past with regard to this girl passing away in Peradeniya. This is no isolated case, because if you look at it, two others who were administered with the same drug is now at the intensive care unit as well. So can you just elaborate about who is responsible for this? Because there has to be someone who's responsible. You can't just pass the buck and put us from pillar to post. Is that possible? Mustn't we say this is the person who's in charge, this person should be held responsible? Because we speak about medical negligence as well.
Yes, to answer that question, I need to come to actually the way I actually indicate, we're coming to the same point. Now, undoubtedly, the cause of death is anaphylaxis, that is allergy.
Yeah.
And allergy is well known in medicine, right? And allergy is something that you cannot predict, right? And if you act, most of the time we can come out of it, but there is no guarantee. So if a patient develops an allergy to a drug and succumbs to it, then for that you cannot point fingers to anybody other than to the patient. That is the reality. But the question here is this allergy is due to a patient factor or a drug factor? Now that is the thing that I cannot give you a straight answer right now, because the jury is still out. Right? So anybody can develop allergy. Even a bee sting can cause an allergy.
There's no question about that.
There's no question about that.
But if there's something wrong with the drug in question, because if you look at the situation with regard to the Fedrisilone drug, the steroid being given to patients after surgery to put into their eyes, approximately around 7 people went blind as well.
So yeah, that particular, there is very strong suspicion that there was something wrong with the drug than this Peradeniya case, because that I don't have information to tell you that the fault was with the drug. That is, I cannot tell you that.
Is it true, Dr. Gunaratna, that some of the drugs that are being brought from India are being made at houses?
Well, there are lots of things.
Is this true? Is this true?
The Indian drug industry, certain part of the Indian drug industry is cottage. That is true, right? Now, the issue is not that. It is not to discuss what is bad about India, what is good about India. So, as a country, you don't need to go and buy a drug that is made in a cottage when you have enough and more reputed companies that you can bring this drug from. That is where the issue is actually.
So, Dr. Gurunath, my next question, I want to quickly switch to Dr. Tenuwan as well, but very quickly, Dr. Gurunath. Now, what I don't understand is, now, let's say a particular drug in question is not right. Why are we sitting on it and waiting for such a long time to understand what is wrong? Don't we have a laboratory to check these?
We do have, but our laboratories cannot check every single thing in a drug. So one thing that you can do is you can send a sample to a foreign country and get it checked.
But we don't have the technical know-how.
No, we don't have that sophisticated labs to check each and everything that you would like to check on a drug, right? But certain simple things they do, like the size of the vial, the weight of the vial, etc., etc. You might be able to check the active ingredient in that, right? But the active ingredient itself will not make it a good drug, even if it is working, because if you have impurities and things, when you administer to the patient, you might develop a complication. So there are lots of things that you need to check in a drug.
But currently in Sri Lanka, we don't have that mechanism.
We don't have it for every aspect of a drug.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Gurunath, the media spokesperson of the Association of Medical Specialists. I now move my attention towards Dr. Tenuwan Wickramasinghe, General Committee member of the GMOA. Dr. Tenuwan, I'll pose a question to you because we all now know by now that there is a crisis in Sri Lanka. I want to drag your attention to the statement that was made by the Minister of Health, Kehile Rambukwella, on the 22nd of June 2023 in Parliament. He says that if no funds are received to purchase medicines, he will resign from his portfolio. Now we are in a deeper crisis. Don't you think the minister in charge has to resign and an independent investigation should be carried out to what is going on in the country at present?
Okay, thank you very much first of all for inviting GMOA for this valuable discussion. So starting it in a professional point of view, I would like to mention that the crisis that we are having today, as the minister told, it's not only about the funds. So fund is one factor, that's true, exchange deficiency. On top of that, we have the officials' inefficiency. Number two is we have corruptions and frauds. Number three, we had a pandemic. So all these factors contribute to the current crisis. I would rather call it a catastrophe because it has become an emergency now. So you asked me about the changing of the minister, whether it be a solution for this problem. In the point of GMOA view, I think that changing the face of the minister is not only the solution now. It has gone beyond that. So we need to address many more aspects of this problem to come into a solution. Some may be short term, some may be long term. As we know, we have 5 major problems in the stage now. If you talk about number 1 is we have lack of supplies. Number 2, we are having poor quality of drugs. And number 3 is we are having a shortage of drugs. And the drug prices has gone up, so the affordability of the consumers is low now. And we recently heard that there are a lot of shortcomings in consumables and breaking down of investigation procedures. If you go to the Cancer Institute Maharagama, there are 5 linear accelerators that they are treating for the cancer patient. One of them is out of order, which is specifically designed for pediatric patients. So we are not treating for the pediatric patients in Cancer Institute from this linear accelerator at the moment. So if you go to the outside, it will cost about 5 to 15 lakhs per treatment. So that is one aspect. And the last aspect is that the human resource management problem in the country. So when it comes to the holistic approach, what happens is people is losing the trust on government health sector.
But I want to drag your attention, Dr. Tenuwan. Let's look at the last 10 years. Let's not look at that far. Dr. Professor Indika, Dr. Vinya, Dr. Padma spoke about, and also Dr. Gurunath spoke about how we had a wonderful healthcare system in the country in the 70s. And we've been able to record very good numbers in even child mortality cases in the country for a very long period of time. But let's look at the last 10 years. Now, we are talking about a crisis like this now when there is a minister in charge. when the NMRA seems to be somewhat defunct in terms of what's going on. Let's look at the systems that have been implemented. We don't know what happened. So there's a lot of red lights that we are seeing right now in the healthcare system in the country. Who is responsible?
Actually, it is very difficult to pinpoint at one person.
Because a lot of people say that the minister isn't responsible. Because the minister is bringing down drugs based on his whim and fancy. Because we know that there is an aspect called waivering of registration. Without going to the NMRA to buy drugs beyond this, through the waivering of registration in the code of ethics in the NMRA. So we know that the minister has to give his nod at the end of the day. So isn't it the minister who is responsible for all this?
Minister is only a one aspect, as I see that one. According to the GMO's view, there are 5 main entities in government health sector that coordinate this drug problem. If you just think about the drug problem. One is the Ministry of Health. Then it comes to the MSD. Then it comes to the NMRA. Then it's come to the SPC
When you say
and
MSD,
SPM.
it's a medical supplies division.
Medical Supplies Division. Then it comes to the NMRA, then comes the SPC and SPMC. So when you are not having coordination among these 5 bodies, if you go through this Auditor General's report that has been published in 2022 May, it clearly elaborates that this coordination mechanism is not there among these 5 bodies. So if the SPC doesn't know what are the drugs manufactured in SPMC, they just try to import them from other countries.
Dr. Tenwan, can I ask you a very quick question? So all these 5 bodies that you spoke about comes under the Minister of Health.
True.
Am I right?
Yeah.
So ultimately the ball has to stop in the Minister of Health's court. Am I right?
Yeah, the responsible person ultimately is the Minister of Health. But not only him, there are a lot of officials under him.
Because at
lot
the end of the day, he is the one who appoints individuals to these
That's
bodies
true.
in question.
But there's a planning unit in ministry. There's a procurement unit in ministry. There's a biomedical engineering unit in ministry. These people are the officials
so
that
everyone is robbing.
There are people who are in every
I
aspect.
didn't know that, Dr. Tenwan. Now you are saying everyone is robbing.
I'm not telling everyone robbing, but I'm telling these bodies are responsible for this crisis.
Okay.
All these 3 bodies. So these are under minister, that's true. But changing of the minister, the face changing is not only the solution here.
Dr. Tenwan, now we are a country. In 2017, the Minister of Health had to go to Singapore to do his operation.
Yeah.
So will the public have any confidence in the healthcare system in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I want to just mention one more point to you, that if you talk about the per capita health budget, the US is spending 12,900 USD per capita health budget. But we are spending only 161 USDs per capita. But we are in par with same indices, health indices as US. So that is the health system we are having. So although we blame to the ministers and all these officials, despite of all these problems, health staff, health people, the entire health staff has managed to maintain the health system up to now.
Right. Dr. Tenwan Wickramasinghe, a General Committee member of the GMOA. Now, Dr. Tenwan, the GMOA president is not as active as the former president, no?
No, that is not the true fact actually. The president is there. We are lined up behind him. He is the one who is guiding up to now. And we are under his cover.
But not like the former president who used to advise President Gotabaya Rajapaksa
That depends upon different characters.
And all that, but that's not there anymore, no?
That different characters act in different ways. But
that
leadership
has
is there.
changed.
Leadership is there.
But that situation has changed. The status quo has changed.
You can see in the outcome.
I can see from your face also some positivity is there. Right. let me quickly introduce my journalist. On to my immediate right is Shihar Aniz. On to my immediate left is Nadim Majid. You can also join in the conversation. You can WhatsApp the questions to 076 656 5353. We've invited 5 eminent doctors in Sri Lanka, and they would be delighted to take your questions if you do have any issues or questions that are lined up. Nadim, because you're coming after some time, why don't we start from you?
I think I should keep coming after some time because that means I get first call. So Dr. Padma, I'd like to start with you actually. So from what I understood from what everyone was saying is that our current crisis is a 3-fold issue. One is, as Dr. Ashoka mentioned as well, the human resources problem, the quality control problem, and the governance issue. there is as Dr. Vinya mentioned as well, there's a general crisis in governance in the country which has brought the country to this state of affairs, and there is a specific or particular crisis of governance in the health sector itself. This has been there for a while. When you were president of the SLMA, the WHO in its sort of overview of the health system of Sri Lanka has also hinted at it. I mean, if you read between the lines of their report, it's there, look, we need to transition, you need better health information systems. You need to transition out of this paper-based system and have it go electronic. There needs to be planning for human resource sort of crunches. So these are issues that have been known both domestically and internationally as well. I want to ask you about what the government should or shouldn't have done, because you're not in a position to answer that. But as the SLMA, the sort of leading civil society organization for medical professionals in the health sector, what kind of advocacy have you all done with the health authorities, with the ministry or with the consultative committee in parliament, to address these challenges that you all have highlighted both today and in the past, and which apparently the WHO has also been aware of, at least since 2021?
Yeah, with regard to situation of health in general in the country, I think the situation, I mean, this is not specific to health. This is there everywhere in Sri Lanka, and that's why people wanted a change, right? But health is highlighted because health is a need of all. So it is specifically, I mean, we need to think that health as special entity, because it is a need of each and everyone, particularly the free health. So therefore, I think that that's why the attention is mainly on health. But I mean, what we are talking or what we are trying to point the finger at is not specific to health in Sri Lanka. Then with regard to the SLMA, of course, that I mean, we are the sort of biggest and the apex professional organization of the country. We have the specialists covering up all the medical specialities, and the I mean, with the knowledge of each and every, including administration as well as the preventive and curative and even the medical education and teaching and so on. So at each and every point when it was required, we were there for advocacy for the government for the benefit of people.
But where has this, because if, for example, if the government were following, let's say, the usual sort of system of consulting professional bodies, the experts, then we wouldn't be in this crisis if those recommendations were being implemented, right? So where has the failure been? Has the failure been on the part of the advocates, or has the failure been on the part of the system, the government itself, the state system?
Yeah, that's exactly what we try to highlight, that the system had not been the proper, because that's why the people wanted a change in system, because I mean, certain areas, we at every point, every possible point, even during COVID, we were with people, we were with media, and we did our every possible thing to see that we educate people on preventive measures, vaccination and so on. And it's not only that. We collected all our expertise and we developed our recommendations, and we every week handed over our recommendations to the government. So that's on our part. But the system, there is a problem in the system.
So now you, for example, I'm sorry, Dr. Padma, just more specifically, you mentioned that the NMRA is now essentially defunct, that it is a non-functioning institution. Now the NMRA was brought about in 2015. There was a lot of talk about implementing the Senaka Bibile policy, and they adopted the National Medicinal Drugs Policy, which led to this act. And the president at the time, who was also a former health minister, President Maithripala, said, this is going to be very good for the country. It will ensure that the patients, the people, will have access to cheaper, good quality medicines.
And we saw during Raj Senaratne's time, this was somewhat implemented on certain drugs. I think 65 drugs. 65
based on
drugs.
what you're saying, though, based on what you're saying about this being defunct now and this being non-functional, are you suggesting that we should be returning to the previous regime of the Cosmetic Devices and Drugs Control Authority, or?
No, it's not that we need to return to the previous what had been there, but our act is not anything done long ago. It was done just few years ago in 2015. It provides each and every recommendation that is required for us to provide people with safe, efficacious, and the drugs with
So what you're saying is that it is not being implemented.
Exactly. What is required is there, but then let us adhere to what is already there.
The legal requirement is already there. It's on paper in the law books. It's
As
there,
the way
but
that I
it's not
see,
being implemented.
I mean, there isn't much need for amendment, but what is required at this point of time is for us to adhere what has already been laid down.
So, Dr. Vinda, what has gone wrong? Because if you look at it, now a lot of people are saying that, as Dr. Padma mentioned before as well, the usual system, the usual practice has been deviated. There seems to be a new practice that has come into play, like the waiving of registration that is taking place right now. Why is that happening now? Is it because someone is trying to make quick buck?
I think so. I think definitely there is a corruption factor here. I must say it. Now, let me, before I elaborate on that, you asked about the role of SLMA in correcting and Nalim also you asked about it. So, in April 2022, at the time of my previous immediate past president, Professor Dharmaratne, a letter was sent to then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, drawing his attention that urgent corrective measures are required because there is a brewing crisis in the health sector. Very specific, and we also give solutions because we are ready to address this situation, and we have also demonstrated how we were facing the resource constraints in the clinical setting by providing clinical guidelines, so ordering only the essential tests and so on. So and we did it very extensively. But there was no response. Of course, there was the political turmoil. Then what happened was in January, we brought to the attention of the President Ranil Wickremesinghe, that there is a serious crisis and asking him to intervene. Right? So that letter was, mainly we were drawing the attention of the President to the functioning of the NMRA. Now there are many aspects in the Act that have not been implemented, right, properly. So first thing was to make sure that the NMRA is functioning properly according to the Act. I'll give you just one or two examples. There is a board, and the board consists of certain categories of professionals, right? Some are ex officio, like the Director General of Health Services, the others are appointed, and there are colleges, specialist colleges that have to nominate members to the NMRA board. College of Surgery, College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, College of Pediatricians, and the Ceylon College of Physicians. And also a Professor of Pharmacology needs to be appointed, and a Senior Lecturer or Professor of Pharmacy. Now, in January, the colleges nominated. So, College of Surgeons nominated a certain consultant, and the College of Obstetrician and Gynecology is also nominated. They were not appointed until July, right? Now, we sent another letter in June drawing his immediate attention to this, and then President responded, and we on the 7th of July, we had a meeting. 7th morning, those two appointments were made. So, then 6
What about the rest of the individuals?
They were appointed.
So there is someone from an expert from pharmacology as well?
No. Pharmacology professor is still, to my knowledge, up to today, I don't think the pharmacology professor has been.
Then this board is not
yes,
not
but
right.
This is the thing. So I don't like to comment because there's no one from the NMRA. It's not ethical, but it's public. The chairman himself said the numbers are there. It's not the numbers that matter.
It's not the numbers that matter.
It is the composition, because there is a rationale why this Act recommends certain specialities to be there in the board, represented in the board. So it's very unfortunate. So starting from that to then ending up in this waivering of registration, which we think is not really following the provision which is 109 in the Act, which says, you know, in emergency situations, but we are not in an emergency situation like that. And also there is a National Advisory Committee that needs to be appointed. I don't think that was ever constituted. SLMA president has to be in that committee. You know, so there is no National Advisory Committee functioning in the NMRA. So I think it's a result of what we are saying is a system's failure as a result of bad governance. So then the commercial interests also can come. And when there's no system, IT system to look at the dossiers of how these...
It's easy for the commercial, those with commercial interest to exploit it.
Yeah. And then the result is that we get the drugs of this quality. Plus, there's another thing that's happening now, because public has now, they are concerned about the quality of drugs. They believe that more expensive drugs are safer, even if they can't afford. Now, I have heard from the consultants themselves asking, "Vadima gananata thiyena drug එක ලියලා දෙන්න." Because so this is a misconception. It can't be. All the drugs have to be, you know, going through this process, and the quality should be guaranteed.
So I want to, Professor Indika, very quickly, we have a question from one of our viewers. Share after that, you can pose a question. This is a question from a viewer completely. This is not of our own. Doctors are very corrupt and work hand in glove with pharmaceutical world, and this has resulted in many issues that are cropping up. What does Professor Indika have to say about this?
Okay. Yeah, I don't think you can't generalize doctors or in that case any medical or health professions in that kind of allegation. Now, let's again look at this in a systems perspective. Now, we know that things have gone wrong. So there are many possible ways that it can go wrong. One, it could be the corruption. It can happen. And it can happen in the way that it was mentioned by this viewer also, but you can't generalize. It's possible because all are human. It can happen at many different levels. Corruption can happen at many different. Then there can be inefficiency. That's also possible. Incompetency and inefficiency. When it comes to drug management or when it comes to patient management, it can happen. Mismanagement is possible. Then there can be favoritism happening.
Favoritism?
Yes, it's possible. It's possible at all levels. What I am telling is, we are talking about the system. So it can happen at all levels. Okay. So all these problems, corruption, inefficiency, mismanagement, incompetency, favoritism, all these things can happen. So I think we have to make use of these incidences to have a look at this system to identify where these things have gone wrong, where the corruption has happened, where the mismanagement has happened, where the inefficiency has happened, and then again, what are the solutions? Again, the solutions are also system-based. I mean, we need a transparent system. We need a proper data system.
Usually what happens is, let's take a corporate for an example.
Yeah.
Let's take a corporate that is functioning in the country. All these corporates are governed by a division called the audit division.
Exactly.
That looks at the internal mechanisms and ensures that no corruption takes place within the ranks, within the corporate itself.
Exactly.
Where is that system in the healthcare procurement in Sri Lanka at present?
Yeah, actually that was what I was trying to come into. I mean, we need to establish the mechanisms where the transparency and the accountability, that's where the audit comes into. The meritocracy is very important. Now, Dr. Vinaya was telling that the NMRA, the constitution is not properly constituted. There are capable people in the country, qualified people in the country, but they are not appointed. So the meritocracy has to be there. The transparency has to be there. The accountability has to be there. That is what we are talking about system change. So again, rather than trying to point fingers or making allegations, I think best would be to identify the areas where these things have gone wrong, and then.
So, Professor Indika, based on what you just said, like the making sure that these bodies are constituted, the advisory committee, like ensuring that those appointments are made, that responsibility as per the NMRA Act is vested with the line minister, the health minister. So, if those bodies have not been constituted, if those people have not been appointed, then the responsibility also lies with the health minister.
to a large extent, yes.
Absolutely.
Because he's the person that's,
Yes.
as per the law, he's the person that's meant to be making those appointments and ensuring that those are functioning.
Yeah. And
so
legally,
if it has not been done, then as per the act, he is the responsible,
He's a responsible person.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the medical ordinance, the final authority is the minister.
It's the minister.
So, very large responsibility.
buck stops with him.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
at the same time, I mean, the advisory bodies and the advocacy bodies, I mean, things have gone wrong in many different times.
Many different.
Dr. Tenuwan, I want to ask this question because since you are representing GMOA and you have large membership, among all the hospitals. Now we see deaths, we see low quality drugs, we see dollar shortage and low quality imports, and we are talking about a crisis. How far this crisis can worsen?
Actually speaking, it has become a catastrophe now. You know that health emergency is there now. If you talk about the hospital wise, we have branch unions in every hospital. So we are getting feedbacks from those hospitals.
So what are those feedbacks?
So we got one incident in Peradeniya. You know that what happened is the prescriber is ultimately the doctor. He is the one who is writing the drug. So if something crisis, something problematic happens in an ETU, emergency treatment unit, when the drug is prescribed and some problem happen to that patient, the repercussion will come to that doctor. No one will take care about the other one. The people will come and damage the property of the doctor. So we got some incident happening in Anuradhapura also. And again we had some incident in Panadura. So all these incidents still they are under investigations. Peradeniya one we are thinking that is anaphylaxis, but still they have not given a true conclusive this thing, the postmortem thing also in an open verdict. So the feedback that we are coming from the hospitals, every day we are getting information that this drug is not available there. This consumable is not available there. So we can't perform this surgery because this item is not there. And this drug is expired, so we don't have additional stocks to perform. So ultimately the smooth healthcare delivery system throughout the country, especially the peripheries, has collapsed. It's imminent, it is almost collapsed now.
Yeah, but Dr. Tenuwan, I remember a few months ago, there was a big house, I remember at Cope, about a system that was brought in and around 600 million rupees was spent. Now what has happened to that system? Because in Sri Lanka everything is like a gas, like a bottle of soda, no, you open the bottle, suddenly the gas comes and then people forget.
Forget it.
Yeah,
System means for what purpose?
For the medical supplies division was linked with the hospitals in Sri Lanka. So when there is a shortage, automatically the MSD is alarmed that there is a particular drug in question that is of shortage, and then the drugs are being dispatched accordingly.
You're
So
referring to the ERP system.
ERP system. Yeah. If you look at this Auditor General's reports in May 2022, this clearly mentions that lacking of a computerized system linking the MSD and the other corporate the bodies that are linked with this drug distribution and supplies and all is a main problem with this drug crisis. So although we spoke about this APR system in the COPE and all, although they say that the system is this much value, 600 million or something like that, still practically this system is not there in the hospital.
Yeah.
There are certain hospitals, it was linked earlier also. If you talk about the Jayawardenepura hospital, yes, they have a system. If you talk about Karapeti hospital, they may have a system, but it is not a generalized system. So when a drug is shortage, so take about Padaviya hospital, or talk about the Mana hospital, or talk about the Silavathur hospital. So you don't have a system when a drug or consumable is in the low stocks there. No one get alarms.
So Dr. Tenuwan, do you think that this is a problem of the flaws of central planning and that we need to decentralize this?
The thing is that although some drugs are not available in medical supplies division, that same drug available in some hospital.
That's what I'm saying.
So that is
do
maldistribution.
you think that, for example, the provincial health ministries who are sort of who can or who have the capacity to look at like hospitals in their province. So you're making instead of having to look at the entire island, you're looking at the smaller this thing, and the responsibility has also been delegated. Do you think that we need to decentralize it to make this system work better?
It may have both pros and cons. So decentralizing means not good always. So if you have a central system that is functioning well, the small island that we are talking about, There is 65,536 kilometers are there. So if you are talking about that system, if it is a good system centrally, it is easy to manage and easy to distribute equally if the system is there. But as long as the corruption is up top there,
Wasn't there a system already in place?
there is a
Wasn't
system.
there a system that was good enough? Now, where is that system?
The problem is that when there's a good system, things go smoothly. But what happened was that there was a dollar crisis at the beginning. And because of this dollar crisis, Sri Lanka was having problems in importing drugs. Then what happened was there was a shortage in drugs here. Then people were going for these emergency purchases, which has a lot of irregularities, as Dr. Gunaratne said correctly. So once it goes to that extent, it is very difficult to revert it back to the normal system.
So, I think...
Doctor, just a minute. Just to summarize, going back to my earlier question, so what you say is like the worsening of crisis, basically, people might come and attack doctors.
There is a risk because we are the one who are prescribing at the end. And people think that doctors has a responsibility to check the quality of the drug before giving. That is the lay people's
Mentality.
That is how they feel. I saw that certain social media posts saying that why doctors are not checking drugs before giving. Because they don't know about this NMRA and how this regularization done, what is the scope of NMRA, how these things regularize and how the drugs. So once we are having a set of drugs at hospital, we don't have any other option rather than prescribing that. And the most worst case is if we want to write 5 drugs, only 2 drugs are available in the hospital. Other 3 drugs we have to write to the external pharmacy.
No, but Dr. Gunaratne, I found this as well, right? I'll tell you a classic example. Recently, I went to the doctors. I frequently visit doctors these days because of the immense stress that I'm going through. I went to the doctor. He prescribed me a particular medicine in question, right? So I go to with so much difficulty, I found this drug finally at a pharmacy at Havelock. And I go and purchase this drug in question. Now this drug was around 125 rupees. Because I had no other option, I bought the drug because the office is providing healthcare, so I didn't see the big difference. And then 2 months down the line, I went and bought this particular drug at another pharmacy located in Colombo because they had the stocks. It was only 8 rupees. And I was thinking, why did I pay 125 rupees to a drug that was worth only 8 rupees? Why, Dr. Gunaratne? Why is there such a disparity?
Yeah, I don't know what this drug is and what this pharmacy is. But to start from a different point, I'll come to what you asked. I can remember a statement made by late, very senior politician Alavi Maulan. He said, when we demand, we were put to remand by the people in command. So there is no question, like Vinaya said, that people in command should take the responsibility. Right? If I have authority, if she has authority, we will probably put this in right. The only problem we have, we know what it is wrong, we know how it may be put, but we don't.
But you're not even saying the ministry is wrong, no, Dr. Gunaratne. The other ones who are saying the ministry is wrong. So you all are saying if you all have the power, you will put things right, but you're not saying who is responsible.
You can interpret whatever way.
No, I'm not interpreting. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying we do not have authority. We do not have the authority to implement things that we think is professionally correct.
Tell me what is professionally correct. Okay, let's go one by one.
One by one.
Let's give a government a message.
Right. We will take this digitalization. Right. Openly we can say, because the president himself is publicly announcing that this country cannot go forward without digitalization. Even yesterday he said. Our NMRA is an organization that was digitalized. There were some problems. Now what have we done to that? Now we are manual. Right? Which is impossible. And if you take the...
So the drug shortage is also because this system is manual, right?
That is one issue. And who is operating that? There were pharmacists released from the Ministry of Health to an MRA. And they were trained internationally in so many countries. 23 of these trained pharmacists are released back to the Ministry of Health. Now it is done by very junior pharmacists. All right, so there is a human resource issue in the manual process. At a time you have abandoned the digitalization. So there is one issue there, right, which needs to put back in place. No two words.
So,
Now,
Dr. Ashoka, this transferring this thing, is that the health secretary or the health minister?
So whoever is
Because someone is signing those orders, right? Whose signature is on the paper?
I only can say I am not signing. All right, and I only can say
No, I am signing.
I only can say I wish I could sign.
Yeah.
Right, but it is not happening. So that is why I said the people in command should take this responsibility. No two words about it.
Minister of Health.
Whoever in command should take responsibility. Now the second thing is this emergency purchase. Now, emergencies, as Dr. Vinaya said, it should not be the norm. It should be the exception. Now it has been the norm. And I will tell you what happens in emergency purchase. Now say a drug A, which is not available. Now the ministry will call for tenders, and they are, and then this drug is not available. Who can provide this in the next 2 to 3 weeks? Now there may be only one company who can do it because he has a stock. Whether he knew whether this is coming up or we don't know, but if he has, right, then he will quote a price which might be very expensive. I will give you one example. When I was the president of the College of Anesthetists, there was a drug that you use to get the blood pressure up. A company quoted 20,000 rupees per vial. When I checked on the web, in UK, that the price of that vial was 2.5 pounds. I can't remember what the pound at that time was. So that would have been less than 1,000 rupees.
Less than 1,000 rupees.
Right, less than 1,000. So you could have flown to London, right, in your business class, right, and still brought those drugs, right, much cheaper than this, right. I said, no, we don't want this, right. Then we sent a circular to our other member consultants asking to use something else, not this drug. The same thing has happened, but I don't think they bought the drug, but I'm saying this is what can happen, right, in emergency purchase. Insulin, soluble insulin, a drug that is widely used for diabetes. The largest company on earth producing insulin is Novo Nordisk company. Actually, there were two companies, but now amalgamated together.
Yeah.
And the price per vial is $1.5. In crisis, somebody quoted a Ukrainian insulin for $4.5.
What did we buy?
I don't know, but this is the this was the court. This was the court. That I'm not saying the government bought that, but what I am saying is this is what happens
During
in emergency purchase.
So, Dr. Ashok, we saw this issue of emergency purchasing. Maybe it's cropping up now in the health sector, but we've seen this happen in another sector as well, energy, in electricity as well. We've seen
Exactly.
that whole thing of, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail.
Now,
And basically, are we looking at that situation led to 10, 12-hour power cuts? Are we looking at a situation where hospitals will be offline for 10, 12 hours?
This is the million-dollar question. The Honorable Minister of Petroleum says that if the sheds are not keeping 50% of their storage, that their license will be cancelled. So I don't understand why the same government cannot take any action for not keeping stocks of the life-saving drugs.
Right. So, Dr. Padma, I have a question for you. Now, I recollect when the Sainik Bibile drug policy was brought into play, Raj Senaratna took great pride saying he's the one who introduced this after so many years. And then he said something very interesting in this press conference. He said the stent was being sold at 350,000 rupees to patients, one stent of a particular brand. I can't mention the brand because of obvious reasons. And the doctor who prescribes this stent gets 100,000 rupees. And he reduced this to 95,000 rupees a stent. Now, Dr. Padma, doctors are also corrupt.
You have to ask that question from Rajit, I think.
That's right, yes. I don't think that it's fair to get isolated cases and discuss and to try to generalize it.
Yeah.
Basically, I didn't get what your point that you said.
My point is, now we are talking about corruption.
Yes.
We are talking about corruption every quarter.
Yes.
Very unfortunate.
Yes.
We should not be
Yes.
talking about corruption in this country now, because
Yes.
we have gone through so much.
Yes.
The power crisis, we
Yes.
are a bankrupt nation, look at
Yes.
the prices of medicine.
Yes.
We should talk about the way forward. But
Yes.
we have to talk about what has gone wrong as well to look at the future. Then only we
Yes.
can correct what has gone wrong.
Yes.
So my question to you is, Dr. Padma,
Yes.
isn't the entire fraternity,
Yes.
shouldn't they be responsible for what's going on right now?
Definitely, yes. This is exactly what I said at the beginning, that the responsibility is not in one individual. That's why as a nation, the people wanted for a change, because it's there in each and every place, right? It is, I mean, it's not only for stents, it's there for drugs, it's there in ministries, it's there in hospitals, and in each and every place. But then I don't think that we could correct it from lower level to top. But then it has to come from top to down.
Yeah.
So I mean, when I mean, our as at present, our main issue is putting the health system on track. So I think that it's with regard to drugs, shortage of drugs, quality of drugs. Definitely, we turn towards our ministry and the NMRA, MSD, SPC, and the responsible people in the Ministry of Health.
So, Dr. Vinaya, you spoke about the SPC, NMRA, and all that. Now, Dr. S.T. Jayaratna, he was at the SPC at one point. Then he was the head of the Sri Jayavarnapura Hospital as well. Now he is the president of the NMRA. Are you seeing a conflict of interest?
Concurrently holding positions that where you can't deliver. I mean, it's not, I won't comment on Professor Jayaratna, but as a principle, I don't think a person, a professional, should hold multiple positions where there is seemingly a conflict of interest, or even when you cannot really focus on the main responsibility of that organization.
At the end of the day, Dr. Vinaya, the integrity of the NMRA is very important, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, in fact, that is why we are losing confidence now. So, it's not just the individuals. I think the whole system now, the act itself may have its flaws.
Right.
Now, I don't agree that all the nominations by professional colleges should
Dr.
be.
Give me a second.
Yes.
We need to go for a quick commercial break, and we'll be back, and then you can continue with the point that you were trying to make. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back.
Generally, Sri Lankan people think one solution, one fix for all the problems under the sun.
What really is the role of a governor now? Provincial council issues as well as local government issues.
What do you say about the strategy of encouraging private-public partnership?
Privatization is good, but within a certain profitable framework to the society.
There's a difference where the politician goes to the people, gets their problems, sorts them out.
At rugby, there's a defense line. Just because you can run fast, you don't run fast because that means that you are diluting
right into the defense line.
You are diluting the strength of the defense line.
Newsline, weekdays at 8:30 p.m. on TV1.
දින 90න් වැඩ 10ක් රටපුරා ක්‍රියාත්මකයි. දෙහි ඕවිට පාලමක්, මයංගලය ඇඹලවත්ත ගම්මානයට පාලමක්, හේන්ගමුව පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතිය, යාය පහ ගල්ගමුව පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතිය, මහකරබෑව පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතිය, සෙල්ල කතරගම අක්කර 20 පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතිය, ගල්පොත්තේගම ප්‍රාථමික විද්‍යාලයේ පරිගණක විද්‍යාගාර අලුත් වැඩියාව හා සනීපාරක්ෂක පහසුකම්, මන්නාරම මඩුක්කරයි පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතිය, පේරාදෙණිය ශික්ෂණ රෝහලේ දන්ත සෞඛ්‍ය ඒකකය අලුත් වැඩියා කර වෛද්‍ය උපකරණ සැපයීම, විල්ගමුව පළුපිටිය ප්‍රාථමික විද්‍යාලයේ පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතිය, දිනෙන් දින ලියලන මහා වෘක්ෂයක් බඳු ගම්මැද්ද රටපුරා ක්‍රියාත්මකයි.
ලොකු රටක් එක ගන්න දෙනකොට ඔකට අපිට ඉතිහාසයක් තියෙනවා ඉගෙන ගන්න. ඉන්දියාව අනන්‍යතාවය ලෝකෙට ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා. උදාහරණයක් හැටියට බැලුවොත් අද බ්‍රිතාන්‍ය ආගමැති ඉන්දියානු පවුලකින්
කටයුතු වල අපිට බලපාන විදිය, අපි ඉන්දියාවත් එක්ක ගනුදෙනු කරන විදිය,
එක්සත් ජනපදයේ බැලුවොත් එහෙම මේ උපජනාධිපතිනි ඉන්දියාවේ. ඉන්දියානු ඩයස්පෝරාව විහිදලා තියෙන්නේ අමුතු විදියකට. මම හිතන්නේ ඉතිහාසෙ මීට ඉස්සෙල්ලා එහෙම වෙලා නැහැ. ඉතින් මේක අලුත් ලෝකයක්. ඉන්දියාව සීග්‍රයෙන් ඉදිරියට යනවා, තාක්ෂණිකව විපනිනවා. ඉතින් ඒ වගේම තියෙන්නේ අභියෝග පැත්ත. ඒ කියන්නේ විශාල රටක් ළඟ ඉන්නකොට තමාගේ අනන්‍යතාවයට බලපෑමක් එනවා.
මිලින්ද සමග නියමාර්ථය ඉරිදා රාත්‍රී 10:30ට TV1 තුලින්.
Sorry, Dr. Vinay, you were talking before about the points that we were talking about the NMRA. You can continue.
So NMRA Act is not the perfect act, but I think it's quite a good act. But the thing is, if the nominations, for example, by the professional colleges are not being, accepted and appointed to the board for a very long time until pressure builds up, I think that's not a good sign. So I think we need to have professionals who occupy these positions, who perform their duties according to the expected standards and also ethical practice. Now you asked a question earlier about certain allegations against doctors. I think sadly we have to accept the fact that in all professions the past probably so many years there has been a deterioration of ethics and ethical practice, and even the professionals have been co-opted often by the political establishment to draw their line, which is very unfortunate. It's a collective responsibility. So as SLMA, we have an expert committee on ethics, and we continue to really advocate amongst the doctors on ethical practices, and also in the medical education. I think ethics have become, because it's now a much more complicated issue, because there are a lot of forces operating in this competitive environment where privatization of health services, all this, there are incentives offers. So sometimes when you are in a situation where you don't get a good decent pay, sometimes you are attracted to certain incentives, and that's totally unacceptable. Right?
Why did Professor Ashish De Silva leave the NMRA?
I really don't know.
Dr. Padma, are you aware?
I'm sorry, no. I just try to recollect my memories. That,
Dr. Vinay, I mean, you talked about incentives. Now, one of the key problems you and Professor Indika spoke about is brain drain, the human resource, right? Not only the doctors, but even the others from the health sector. I mean, have you all identified why they are leaving, and have you come up with some solution to stop that?
Yeah, Shihar, I think Professor Karunathilak can elaborate on it, but of course the main thing is the economic pressure, and particularly the young doctors who are uncertain of a future in this country. It not just affects the medical profession, of course, in general, so many professions where and there's a big demand. So there are pull factors from outside, and sometimes that's also not ethical. For example, WHO has a code of ethics for foreign countries to recruit doctors from the low-income countries, right? But these are not being adhered to because there's a big demand and there's a big need in those countries. So on the other hand, I think there's also a frustration. Now, if you take, for example, a specialist who can do surgeries throughout the day, if you don't have the supplies and all that, his skills are not being used by the country, then you feel that you are not being useful, right? So I think it's not just a financial factor. There is also that frustration, uncertainty, when will things improve, and also you see the level of wastage, corruption in the whole process, then you get frustrated. So that's
professional dissatisfaction.
Professional dissatisfaction, definitely. So what, just before Professor Karunathilak answers about the ethics, I think it's very important that we emphasize on ethical practice. Sometimes it's very difficult, but I think in all professions, and particularly administrators, we as doctors take a oath, which is called the Hippocratic Oath. But it goes beyond that, because now in this current situation there is a lot of instability, and it's our duty to stabilize the system, and it's also our responsibility to contribute to restoring the trust in the health system. There, integrity, accountability is so important. And if, as it was shown earlier, the audit reports, what action have the administrators taken? Nothing. So, then here you have identified who is the individual responsible. Can't there be a recovery process, asset recovery? They are not poor people, right? So who is accountable in that sense when in instances where the culprit have been identified? So that's sad. So that's lack of governance.
Let me add one more point to that. If you talk about the pay of a doctor, if you consider Sri Lankan consultant getting 88,000 basic salary in Sri Lanka. But if you go to a country that people are migrating these days, they are paying 3.5 to 4 million in that country. But still our consultant was staying in Sri Lanka and also staying in the government sector. But not only this salary problem, but because of professional dissatisfaction, because of the frustration, as Dr. Vinya told correctly, and also not available of these career pathways. So there are very limited career development pathways for doctors in Sri Lanka.
But consultants also do private practice in Sri Lanka and earn millions, no?
That's another point. Even in foreign countries, they can do private practice. I'm talking about the government health system. If you talk about the NHS in UK, and if you talk about the Sri Lankan government sector, the salary difference and the pay difference and the living and the working environment, the structure they have to work, and the frustration that they are getting from the pressure they are getting is totally different.
And even if you account for the difference in the cost of living, the gap is still very high.
It is very high.
Can I
go
ahead. Further? Yeah, I'll give one classic example that will really illustrate this situation. Now, recently, about a few years ago, the specialty of emergency medicine was introduced to Sri Lanka, and that's a very important specialty because it's really life-saving. A well-trained emergency physician will be able to save lives with prompt action. And Sri Lanka trained 30 emergency physicians, and mostly they were trained in Australia with the state of the facilities and training techniques. But now about 23 of them, they have left.
24 actually, sir.
24, yeah. What's the reason? Now, if you take those emergency physicians, they are fairly young. And they don't do private practice also because in emergency medicine, you can't do private practice. So they get only the consultant salary. That's the starting point, maybe maximum 200,000. And most of them, they are posted to faraway areas. Again, justifiably so. But when you use that for traveling, and if you are given quarters, and currently the taxation is also there for the salary as well as the other facilities, then actually nothing is left. And when you go to those areas, the facilities that are given it may not be possible to implement what they have learned in the other countries. So because of all these reasons, and again the pull factors like Dr. Vinya was mentioned, the salary that they were getting, would have got in Australia might have even 60 times. And with less pressure, here they have to work 24 hours and less working time, less stress.
And they don't even have the tools to actually do the job.
Exactly. Now, someone who is posted into Anuradhapura, they have to travel, if they are living in Colombo, they have to travel all the way. And no allowances, nothing is given, but everything is taxed. So in this kind of situation, there can be a point that they can be really frustrated and they will be looking for other options. I don't think that's the correct thing to do, but that's a human nature. And the problem again is, it's not only numbers. You might say only 23 has migrated, but if you take the total number of 30, it's a fairly high percentage. And in other areas, you might say it's only one anesthetist has migrated, or maybe few surgeons. But that person may be the only anesthetist in that hospital. That person may be the only specialist in that district. So the service would be lost to hundreds and thousands of people. So it's not only the numbers. And also, we have to look beyond the numbers. We are looking at the skills mix. We are not only losing doctors, we are losing nurses, other health professionals. To provide healthcare, it's teamwork. That's what we call the skills mix balance. So when you are losing these people, it's not just the numbers. Actually, it's the service that the country will be getting, the quality of the health service. So the solution, it has to be looking at the root causes. There has to be there can be regulatory measures, of course. But only regulatory measures alone cannot stop that. You need to give certain incentives. Now, this current tax situation is actually a huge burden for a lot of professionals. So there can be maybe certain incentives, and at the same time, there should be certain incentives to improve the workplace, work environment. If you go to the quarters of even consultants, you won't believe the pathetic situation. Even the living quarters of even the specialist consultant in faraway areas, you won't believe the situation. So that kind of reality is there. Now, there was a comment about doctors making millions and millions with the pharmaceutical. There may be, but only 30% of the doctors in the country do private practice. There are so many people, so many doctors who may be traveling in public transport, living in quarters and giving service. So you have to look at those factors. There can be non-financial incentives, you have to give those facilities, and also maybe the education to develop the career and the job satisfaction, all these measures. So basically, if you want to retain them, you have to look at those retention measures.
Right. So Dr. Padma, there is a question from one of a viewer who's watching the show tonight, who identifies himself as a retired medical professional. The question is, in the absence of a functioning NMRA, who is responsible for maintaining the quality of drugs? The same drug could be purchased from several producers. Some have their manufacturing set registered with WHO while others not. The latter group of drug may have impurities giving undesirable reactions. Who is responsible in the event such a drug is used on someone and results in severe side effects?
Yeah. So he has given actually the answer. This is the exact thing that we represent for. That if the NMRA is made dysfunctional, right, defunct, then what would happen to the patients? What would happen to the quality assurance that was given to patients? I mean, as it was highlighted, the doctor's work is a teamwork. So it involves, it's not only the nurses, it's not only the other therapists and so on, but it needs the quality drugs, the devices. I mean, if we are to efficiently function, and it has to be correctly manufactured, it has to be trustworthy, and it has to be transported, then distributed stored in correct way, and then distributed, and then only it has to be dispensed. So for all these things, the place that is important is NMRA. So it cannot be defunct. That's exactly what we are saying. Say for us, if the country needs a healthy nation, and if we are to provide a service with some quality, the NMRA cannot be defunct. So that's why we think that we need to make it, I mean, by some means, that we need to see that it is intact.
So Dr. Padma, right now, as Dr. Vinya correctly pointed out before, we have now moved on to buying medicine on emergency purchases. So let's say a country like France or a country like the UK have used a particular drug in question. So shouldn't or cannot the country purchase the same medicine because those have been tested and tried in those countries? And can't we buy those medicines in Sri Lanka in the government's defense? If the government says we are just using the medicine that are already being used in UK, France, and so on and so forth.
Yes, there is room in the NMRA itself that when the committees select drugs, I mean, based on that, if they have applied for if they had bid for the tenders, and they just evaluate even without that, if it's from the under criteria for selection, one of the criteria is that whether the drug is being used in any of the European or in developed countries. So that factor is taken into account by the evaluators, and it could be well given priority, and then could place the order. It could be done.
But the issue is that the cost may be much higher.
Cost may be much
so
higher.
So affordability is also important. It's not just the quality.
Because at the end of the day, the quality, safety and efficacy is the basic points of the NMRA, isn't it, Dr. Min?
No. Yeah, but then the pricing is also an important. There's a committee on pricing as well.
Yes.
Because whether it's the government or the private sector, somebody has to pay, so even if the drug is given free to the patient in the state health system,
someone has to
pay the bill. So then you can't afford to have a very expensive drug, no?
And most of the innovatives are pretty expensive. If we try to purchase them, then we may not be purchasing more than few drugs. I mean, maybe that we'll have to forget many. because they are so expensive.
So right now, there are approximately, Dr. Gunaratna, there are approximately around 683 plus drugs. Those are deemed as essential medicine in Sri Lanka. Out of this number, how much of drugs don't we have at state hospitals at present?
According to the minister himself, about 20%. So that is out of about 800, including emergencies and other drugs, close to 190 is not there. But just to clarify something that Dr. Padman said about the innovative products, actually you can give innovative drugs at a very low price. I will give you one example. Now you have this cochlear implant which you put inside the ear, right?
What implant?
Cochlear implant. Cochlear implants, right? They are made in Australia, right? And we bring it from Australia. We used to, I think even now. Now the cost of the implant, if you go and buy from UK, is much cheaper than in Australia itself. The reason, the National Health Service bulk purchase that from Australia, so they get at a very competitive price. Now you have a drug, you have different brands. Now there was a regulation, I think Dr. Vinay will clarify if I'm wrong, that not more than 20 should be registered in one drug. I think that was withdrawn. Now we have so many. This is unnecessary, right? So what happens when the tender is being called, there may be large number of bidders, and then sometimes you will go for the cheapest, which may not be the best. So how do you get out of this problem? The government should purchase from government to government. Yeah, I have been...
so when you purchase from government to government, they can't make a quick buck, no?
You can't.
Yeah.
It is government to government. Now, when the Honorable Rajitha Senaratne reduced the price of drugs, right? Of course, paracetamol went out of market for a while, but a lot of people thought all these innovative products will go out of market, right? Because you cannot give it at this price. But what happened? The sale of those products went so up that the companies made a bigger profit than what they used to make when the price was high. Right. And there's a big report by the WHO, right? What happened when the price was made low? Everybody went and bought the best drug, not the cheap one. And that increased their sales. So I don't agree that these innovative brands cannot be given at a competitive price or a cheaper price. You can, but the government should take control. But unfortunately, it is not. Now, if you leave one or two, then there is no competition. Right? You create a monopoly, so you cannot do it. So you need multiple companies, but not a huge amount. You need certain amount of competition, and the government should be a competitor.
Dr. Gunaratna, you are talking about government to government purchase. Yes. Now, some of these medicines now we are talking about is from India, right?
No.
It's from government to government purchase.
No. Government to government is that you get from the government, not from a private company. Now what will happen? Now we probably using the Indian credit line, not necessarily that we are importing from the government of India.
But Share, though the Indian credit line is in existence, it's just that Sri Lanka can use the credit line to buy medicine.
Buy medicine
it's
from
not directly,
India.
Yeah, from India, not directly from
No,
the government.
I'm not saying that the drugs from India is low quality, right? Now the problem is this check and balance is not there by the NMRA.
But I don't know whether you remember, Dr. Gunaratna, when the COVID vaccine came, there was opposition ministers who were saying it's from government to government. That also they were trying to make a quick buck of around $5.
No, even in case of government to government, it has to go through NMRA. That's why happened it for vaccines.
Yeah.
And there was a delay in NMRA giving approval, and that's why government was unhappy.
Even in UK, certain number of drugs are brought from India actually. India is the largest drug maker in certain varieties. So they are getting down from India and Bangladesh. But the thing is that they go through that system, they go through that process. So they don't get the quality problem in their aspect.
So one problem we have is this emergency purchase, which has become the norm than the exception. The second problem is the waiver of registration. The waiver of registration also should be the exception than the norm. Now, when you have a WOR, then the NMRA has no responsibility about that drug. So the company should take the responsibility. But there is provision, right, under exceptional circumstances to do that, provided the company takes the responsibility, and there should be somebody who will actually negotiate the price.
So, Dr. Gundatta, now out of these 693 essential drugs, how many have we purchased under this emergency purchase?
The figure, I don't have the figure. I don't know whether anybody has. No, I don't have the figure to say how many.
So overall, Shihar, just to give some context to it, the number of medicine, the SKUs or the medicine that are used in government hospitals account to approximately 1,800. So out of this 1,800, as Dr. Gunaratna spoke about, around 600 to 800 drugs are essential drugs. And what happens, Dr. Gunaratna, when these drugs are not available? Now you work at...
let me correct you. Yeah. There are 14 vital drugs.
Yeah.
There are 646 essential
drugs, that's right.
Then there are non-essential drugs of 486.
Right.
Total come to 1,146 actually.
Right, okay.
So out of that 1,146, there was a committee appointed in the ministry. GMO is one of the stakeholders. We were giving proposals that this 1,164 drugs can be lowered to 850 or something. So that will save us around 10 to 20 billion from our drug budget. That proposal was made, actually that scrutinization was done, and the proposal was submitted. But unfortunately, all the colleges agreed. But still, unfortunately, it was not implemented.
So, Dr. Tenuwan, now you work at Sri Javardhan University hospital. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So the Sri Javardhan University is somewhat of a semi-government hospital, right? So you can pay money and also get treatment.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes,
Dr. Tenuwan. So when someone comes in to the hospital and tries to pay money and buy a drug, are you trying to tell me that drug is not available for those who have the money and those who don't have the money?
Let me clarify about the Javadhanpur hospital first. It is a fee-paying hospital. Everyone comes there has to pay a fee. And sometimes they are doing a private cases and some are non-private cases. All those things have a bill. But when a patient comes to the hospital, even if they have money, there may be instances that they don't get the exact medicine that they want. We may have to subsidize that one. We may have to replace that one with another one.
So when you say you have to replace it, are you trying to replace it with a brand name or a generic name?
When there is a prescribed drug, say that you have been prescribed paracetamol, so you can't issue another drug for that. We can change the brand, but we can't change the generic name.
So you're saying the brand is, are the brands not available or the drugs not available?
Both. Sometimes the brand is not there, sometimes the drug is not there. So I'm working in the intensive care unit. Sometimes the essential drugs that we need in our intensive care unit is not available in some days.
So then what is the option?
Only option is we have to write it to the outside pharmacies. We have to give a prescription to, so patient has to get them out.
So you're saying government hospitals don't have the drug, but private hospitals and private pharmacies have the drug?
Yeah, yes. That is the situation.
That's a hell of a story now.
That's one reason the out-of-pocket expenditure is very high in Sri Lanka. So even if you
it's
go
about
to
close to 50%, no?
Yeah,
it's
46%.
46, almost 50%.
Even if you go to a government clinic, there may be drugs that are not available, so the doctors will have to.
So there has been, Professor Indika, you are correct, because there have been instances where people have gone to the Castle hospital, the maternity hospital, and before admission, the doctors give you a list of the drugs that need to be purchased from outside the hospital and be brought.
And I have seen in some state hospital where they have a board say, today you don't have these drugs. in this hospital.
And the sad thing is that, just take an example of a diabetic patient. If he's taking 3 drugs for diabetes, if he comes to the clinic and say, we don't have all 3 drugs to prescribe, we don't have it at a government hospital, so we are writing 1 to the hospital pharmacy and 2 to the outside, and patients don't have that ability to go and buy them from outside. What they do is they take only that 1 drug. So ultimate burden will be again on the government health system, because the patient will get hyperglycemic and he will get complications. He will come back to the hospital with a lot of
combination of medicines. That help. Combination that's needed to treat the condition.
So because of this problem, the GMOA gave a proposal to the minister telling that at least 1 or 2 essential drugs for the common diseases, say that high blood pressure, for cholesterol, for diabetes or whatever it is, make it available at least that 2 drugs to an affordable price. Give a concession to that 2 drugs. So at least patient will go and doing that. They are not doing that. That is the unfortunate thing.
So based on what you're saying, I mean, if 50% is out of pocket, like you have to pay out of pocket, we don't really have free healthcare then. It's partially free.
Not only for the drugs, medicines, also tests. Because the reagents are also not there in most of the...
So it's not free healthcare, it's partially free healthcare.
No, this free health is not sustainable. That also you need to realize. It would have been sustainable, free health and free education once upon a time. But with the complexities, for a third world country and a poor economy like this, you cannot support it. Now that really says we need to make sure that we actually divert what we have for emergencies and whatever. Now the problem we have is for a cosmetic surgery also we undertake in the hospital. Right, so we actually should, a socialist country like China, do you think there is free education and free health? No. It is all on insurance, right? And you have to pay your premium, right? To pay your premium, you have to work, right? There is no free health, no free education, right? Free education is only up to grade, I think grade 9, and after that you have to pay.
Professor Indika, you were talking about, doctors migrating and like the conditions that doctors have to function in Sri Lanka, and so partially agree. But then you take a case of like, let's say, Cuba, which is known for exporting doctors. I think one of our top exports is housemaids and domestic workers to the Middle East. One of Cuba's top exports is doctors. I mean, and other healthcare staff as well. So you have that kind of what they call Cuban medical internationalism. But Cuba also is not a country that is in the best of economic affairs wise. It's not in the best state. They're also in a very precarious sort of condition, embargoes, trade embargoes, there's a lot of geopolitics happening there. But they seem to be able to make this healthcare system work. Or is that just on the surface? Is it just cosmetic? Are those problems?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, they also have very limited resources. And so it's a matter of putting the limited resources that is available on the essential areas. That's exactly what Sri Lanka has also done some time ago. But now the situation has changed. Yeah. And so what they are doing is basically putting more emphasis on public health, disease prevention, so on and so forth, and not on very sophisticated interventions. Similar to what Sri Lanka has focused on nutrition, sanitation, health education, literacy. So it's not only actually medicines. I mean, even one factor that has led to the high health situation in Sri Lanka is actually the female literacy rate. So those factors are also very important. So that's the reason. And I would like to respond to your other question about why can't we export doctors? Okay, if that is such a profitable industry, why wouldn't US do that? Why wouldn't UK do that? Why are they getting doctors from our countries? Because actually producing a good doctor is a very resource intensive exercise. With the clinical resources that are required, the facilities that are required, producing a good doctor. I mean, you can basically produce, say, run-of-the-mill doctors through various substandard institutes. That's possible. But giving good training, the amount and the resources that you are putting in, if you export that doctor, actually that is not profitable. And also, doctors who will be migrating, is unlikely to send money to this country because they will be migrating these other countries and open the bank account in those. That's what happens. I mean, that is why countries like India, Sri Lanka, Commonwealth countries, the doctors are produced.
But then, Professor India, when you consider the fact that, okay, in Sri Lanka, we're producing good doctors, there is quality control, there is monitoring by the SLMC, etc. So when those doctors leave, having been educated on the taxpayer's dime, they might be leaving for their reasons might be fair, but aren't they being unfair by the taxpayer who paid?
Honestly, I mean, this is my personal viewpoint. I think there need to be some accountability. There need to be some account. At least maybe some time period, some kind of period where they have to serve the country. Because I mean, giving free education, free medical education is actually a benefit that you can really get. So in that way, there need to be some kind of accountability from the other side also. I mean,
we used to have it, no?
Yeah.
But I have a different view on this. It is because I remember some time back when the AIDS epidemic, when it was surfacing in the mid-80s, one journalist, like one of you, asked then Minister of Health, what precautions and what are the actions that the government is hoping to take to curtail AIDS in Sri Lanka. And this minister said, as a Buddhist country, if you stick to the 5 precepts, there won't be a problem. Now, if you took that minister's advice, right, and preached the 5 precepts, you can imagine what the AIDS control situation in this country will be today, right? So the same way you can preach this, right? But that is not the answer to the problem that we have. Now, you can say this is unfair, this and that, but that's not going to help the problem, right? You need to see what the problem is and have a different perspective.
What is the specific solution to the problem of the brain drain of doctors?
This attrition of brain drain had been there in time immemorial, right? So this discrepancy in salaries, facilities, etc., had been there, and people a certain percentage were. Now, what you need to see is why has this ratio completely reversed? In the sense, when 70% stayed here, 30% left. Now we have a situation where 30% is or less is remaining and 70% is leaving, right? So that is what you need to actually look into.
And what is the solution for that?
The uncertainty.
Exactly. It is not merely the money.
So basically, the reason that, for example, 70% doctors are leaving is also the reasons. I mean, there is some, maybe not the exact same reasons, but there is some overlap between also the increased number of people who are getting on rickety fishing boats and trying to run away from the country. There's economic uncertainty, there's insecurity.
It is not 100%. It is not 100% monetary. Right? Because if it is monetary.
No, it's not only monetary. No, there are people who get on boats and run away for security reasons.
Yeah.
Right? They fear like intimidation.
You have to look into the root cause. Uncertainty of your own future.
Yes.
So I feel like even there, root cause is the state. The command responsibility is missing.
No, why?
Command responsibility.
Why do you think that people want to do medicine in the first place? Why not to do music instead? Why medicine? Because you want to secure your future. But at the end of it, now you see the very future that you wanted to secure by doing medicine is completely unsecured.
So, I mean, when it comes to, so that's why the regulatory measures, by putting rules and regulations, it won't work. I agree with Dr. Ashoka, it won't work. So you have to really look into the root causes, and the mechanism, the solutions are actually well established, well researched. I mean, it is not just regulatory, but there can be financial incentives, there can be non-financial incentives that should address the root causes. So those measures are actually well established. What are the things? So it's not just giving money, but there are other things. You have to make sure that they are the security, the job security and the job satisfaction, the facilities, children's education,
career development,
accommodation, career development, continuous professional development, all these areas. So they have been very well identified actually.
more than
so there's
anything else for you, me, for both of us to make the country stable. No?
So there's a question from a medical practitioner again, Dr. Gunratna. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing these names right because of medical terminology, but I'll try my best to stick to it. Why isn't Rocephin, original ceftriaxone, Rocephin from original ceftriaxone from Roche not available in Sri Lanka? Why did Roche withdraw the product? Indian ceftriaxone injections are used in private Malaysian and Indonesian quality products. Why low quality Indian ceftriaxone that even veterinary surgeons don't use on animals are used in Sri Lanka?
So this is what I said. Now, why the company withdrew, I don't know. Whether it was not financially viable for them to operate in this country, I don't know. Now the question is whether the ceftriaxone brought from India is good or not. That is the question basically, no, right?
Those are not even used for animals.
That I don't know because I'm I don't know about that. But the question is.
I also am not. I don't know. I'm just.
The question is whether the ceftriaxone brought from India or China or X country is good or not, right? So that is why the regulator is there.
That is why NMRA is there.
That is why NMRA is there. Now it is like halal food. Can you look at some food and say this is halal or not? You can't. Can you eat it and tell no? So that is why before it is being brought or cooked, there has to be a regulatory body to certify that this is halal or not. In the same way, there has to. That is why the regulator should be there. So if the regulator is defunct, how can you guarantee this?
So now, Dr. Vinaya, the NMRA is there, but the NMRA is not 100%.
No, NMRA is a huge rubber stamp. That is what has happened to the NMRA.
So there had been these appointments made, no? So if the minister can also complete the appointments, appoint the professor of pharmacology within the next few days and appoint the advisory committee. I mean, it has not been there, I think, since the formation of the NMRA. I think then there can be, and also stop the wavering of registration and have the routine. And it's not the financial problem. In fact, at that point I wanted to tell, because they said that there was not enough money after even the Indian credit line. So then we met the secretary to the treasury, to the finance ministry, and he assured that there was, of course, there are these outstanding payments to be made to main suppliers who had been producing, who had been supplying the registered medicine. So, but that has also been slowly, they have been paying installments and also converting some of the outstanding into bonds and things like that, some formula which I also don't understand, but they were saying that they were slowly paying back whatever the outstanding amount.
So I just want to ask a general question from the panelists. So are you trying to say that if this situation is not arrested immediately, come the next few weeks, come the next few months, when I go to buy my medicine that I usually take on a daily basis, it won't be available at pharmacies?
It will still be available, but probably will not be able to afford an average person, because you have a good insurance coverage.
Yes,
so
I'll be able to. No, but Dr. Vinay, my question is, it's not about the people who have. It's about the people who do not.
Exactly.
The people who go at the end of the day to state hospitals for medication.
So there are two issues.
It's
a trust issue. Trust issue.
Sorry. And the repercussion is not within 3 weeks, but it's for an year.
Absolutely.
You place orders for an year. You make decisions for an year.
Sometimes
well in advance.
6 months in advance.
Well in advance.
Because
and also now NMRA is a regulatory authority. So as at present, as the way that I understand, NMRA feels that every request that comes from the ministry has to be authorized, which is not the case. NMRA is the regulatory authority and it's not the ministry.
Right.
So NMRA should be able to decide what need to be authorized and what should not be authorized.
But maybe they're afraid that, if they don't authorize requests from the ministry, that they'll be accused by the minister of being part of a conspiracy.
Then they are not
You may be
to
correct.
undermine
We
the
do
health
not know.
sector.
You may be
We
correct.
don't know.
Ask, I mean, you'll
So y'all also must be concerned that
How
the minister
independent-
might accuse y'all of being part of a conspiracy to undermine the health sector.
How
That's-
independent is Sri Lanka's NMRA?
So, if you have those positions filled the way that the Act directs you to fill them, I think then that can be guaranteed.
Because the committee is consistent of the technically competent people.
Even the current medicines evaluation committee, I think, is very well functioning.
Yes.
Very, very competent people, and they are doing a very good job. But then their decisions can be overrun through this other procedure.
Dr. Vinya, I think this is a problem that we have in a lot of sectors in Sri Lanka, right? And we've seen this not just in essential sectors like health and education as well, but this has also happened in the past in sports, for example, where the minister overrides selection committees. So basically what I'm understanding here is that there is expertise, there is capacity in the medical sector, in the health sector itself, to fulfill these duties and these responsibilities, whether it's regulation or otherwise. But the incompetency is really coming from the political class. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
The same things that we were talking about. The root causes are the same. It has to be either corruption, favoritism, inefficiency, incompetency. And the answers are the same. I mean, you have to, the meritocracy, transparency, accountability. I mean, those could be very general answers. But ultimately, when you do it deep into the situation, everywhere,
Right.
health,
The
power,
principle is the same.
it's the same.
Right. So I want to give each speaker 3 minutes each to wrap up and to suggest a way forward for Sri Lanka. What must we really do as a nation? Because I think those who are watching the show tonight, may it be the government or the individuals at the NMRA or even the Minister of Health, what is the message you have for them? And what is the message you have for the public? When they go to take medicine, what must they be cautious of? Because at the end of the day, it's their lives. Ultimately, they will have to pay the price. Ultimately, their loved ones are going to be affected. So what is the message you have for both the government and the people? So let's start off with Dr. Tenuwan Wickramasinghe.
Yeah, let me tell you that, first of all, you asked about that once you go to in 3 weeks time, when you go to a pharmacy, you don't get medicine. Rather than that, the problem will be there will be no one to prescribe the medicine in some time. So to get the medicine, you have to have a prescription.
No, Dr. Tenuwan, I agree with you fully, because the consultant that I visit every 6 months is not in Sri Lanka anymore. He has gone overseas.
Yeah, and the thing is that the central
And that's a bitter truth, unfortunately, because he said he doesn't want to live in these present circumstances and conditions.
So the central might function for a few years' time, but the peripherals will be collapsed. That is inevitable if this brain drain continues. So we are talking about 2 problems today. One is this drug issue, one is this brain drain problem. So to this drug issue, the first that we have to have temporary short-term plans and also long-term plans. So long-term plan is we need to have a full-fledged state-of-art quality assurance laboratory, which we don't have at the moment. So if you want to, what we are doing is, if we have a problem with ceftriaxone, we withdraw that drug and send sample to some overseas countries, and we are waiting for 3-4 months until the report comes. And next time it happens another drug, we do stop that one and send that is the same thing that is happening. We are putting temporary solution to each event. So rather than that, we need to have a fully fledged state-of-art quality assurance lab which has international accreditation. But it may take 3-4 years. So until such time, we have temporary solutions, such as we have laboratories in our university sector. We have laboratories in our private sector. So we can look into them. We can see what are the available facilities there, and we can utilize them for the moment. So that is about the drug issue. And there is no any argument that NMRA has to be doing their responsibility. There is a scope that they have mentioned in their website. What is their scope, which they are not doing at the moment. So that has to be re-established. When you are talking about the brain drain thing, we have identified 10 problems in this brain drain problem. and we have given 10 solutions for these 10 problems, starting from financial facilities, starting from non-financial incentives, developing working conditions and living conditions, schooling of the doctors and the professional development of the doctors, career development pathway of doctors, and to retain these people in Sri Lanka and specifically in the government sector. So we have been doing this one throughout the history, and we have been maintaining equal and equitable healthcare system throughout the country. The same facility that you are getting from the NHSL can be get from the Jaffna Hospital also. So to regain this thing, to stop this brain drain, we need to give these monetary and also non-monetary facilities to these people to keep them inside the country. So these are the two aspects that we are thinking about. As GMOA, we have make 10 proposals for that. If you want to go through, we have given this to media also. So there are 10 proposals, 10 problems. We have find out 10 solutions.
I'm very skeptic on this, Dr. Tenwan, to be very honest, but we take what you're saying.
No, what I mean is that if you want this problem to be at least to be handled at this moment, we need to reverse that one at this moment. Otherwise, if we continue this one for another 6 weeks, the number of people who are sitting for exams, number of people who are migrating will be more than this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tenwan Wickramasinghe, representing the GMOA.
Thank you.
Dr. Asok Gunaratne.
I think the cardinal problem that many institutions in this country as a whole face, that we don't have the basic concept of collecting data analysis, projections based on the analysis, and whatever remedial actions that has to be taken on that. Now, this does not flow for some reason, right? Now, for instance, if you take the brain drain, now the ministry will not know how many consultants will not be there in another 1 year's time. Now, the reason somebody goes for foreign training, which is mandatory if you want to be a consultant. Now, he's due next year, so he's not coming. So then they will send a reminder, second reminder, third reminder, and then they may serve vacation of post. And you are thinking 2 years ahead. So they are lagging behind time. Right? Because some of these doctors are our trainees and they come for holidays, and we know that they are never going to return back. So data interpretation, analysis, projection, this line does not operate. So that has to be made operational, right? So if they are unable to do, they can get help from institutions like the SLMA, which actually, because the SLMA, unlike the many professional colleges, it's a kind of a broad-based one, where a lot of all the specialties are there. When actually during COVID time, I was the president of our college, he was the president of the SLMA. I think within 48 hours, we brought some 52 colleges under one umbrella. And
it's still functioning.
It's still functioning, right? So then, as I said, then we can do that, but we don't have commanding power, right? So then when proposals are made on professional, so people in command should accept and then implement that. So this is the issue that I constantly see, right? That when it comes to this quality of drugs, the NMRA should actually eclipse from what they are, right? Emergency purchase and waiver of registration should be the exception and not the norm. And they need to digitalize as soon as possible. And the health ministry, I suggest, get advice from the petroleum, right? And maintain stocks, right? If they are unable to do it on their own.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Gunaratne, media spokesperson of the Association of Medical Specialists. I now move attention to Dr. Padma Gunaratne, past president of SLMA.
Yeah, while agreeing with everything that was mentioned by the previous these two, I think that what is important for Ministry of Health, that is the main service provider for people, needs to be responsible. And the transparent, the delivery of services has to be transparent, and they need to be accountable. I think my interest would be more towards public, to appeal them I mean, because that it's, I mean, though he said that free health service is difficult to be maintained, I believe that there has to be at least certain part of free health service intact in this country, because at least for about 75% of the community, it is a need. So we need to safeguard the free health service. So I appeal people that true that some have gone, but there is a lot that's still remaining here. The doctors, there are doctors that who are committed, there are paramedics, the nurses, the allied health professionals, and plenty of other services that are still remaining in the hospital. So the people still have to have the trust on the system, particularly for maternity care, infant care. I mean, there are many, so much of services that are being delivered, provided even at this point of time. So if someone tries to say, when a doctor makes a mistake, or when a nurse makes a mistake, or when mishap happens in the hospital, they try to point the finger at the whole system in that district or the whole hospital. So it's like you criticizing your own place, because that's the same place that's there for all of them to come at the end. So I think that there is so much that is still left behind. So people to have the trust on the system and to feel free to make use of it, because there is still so much left behind.
Thank you very much, Dr. Padma Gunaratne. I now move my attention to Professor Indika Karunatilaka.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to understand the gravity of the situation. It may not be as dramatic as the hospital system collapsing in 3 weeks' time, or drugs not being available in 3 weeks' time. But again, the gravity is nonetheless very serious. I mean, it's a tip of the iceberg. It's a situation that might, if not arrested, might affect generations. It may be the drugs that patients are not taking, not able to take, that will affect their whole lifetime, and maybe their generations to come, even the nutrition. And the clinicians and the academics that we are losing, maybe the people who will be serving generations. So this is a serious situation that has to be arrested immediately, because otherwise the repercussions will be for generations and decades to come. And again, the answer lies in identifying in the system. I mean, we have to safeguard the free health system. So my appeal for the general public to understand this situation, the gravity of the situation, and be part of the change agents. What people ask was for a change, but actually nothing much has changed. The corruption, the inefficiency, the mismanagement, favoritism, nepotism, still there. So the answers, again, the same. Establishing meritocracy, and then the efficiency, transparency, accountability, and very importantly, data-driven leadership. We need that. So my appeal from the people is be the change agents and lobby for that.
Thank you very much, Professor Indika. Dr. Vin, I want to touch a little bit differently from your side, because you also represent the SLMA. Tell us, what is the message you have for the public who are now very fearful to go to the hospitals, to take medicine and all that and more?
So even before the crisis came, as a public health practitioner, I think I would appeal for people to protect their health by doing taking all the preventive measures, so that they can promote their health from their nutrition to good health habits, and not taking risks and not risky behavior and all that. That's more than it's important more than ever before now, because it's going to cost you a lot, right? So having said that, I think the public also needs to be taking more responsibility towards holding the system accountable. Speak up. If they witness any deficiencies, I mean, not just to criticize. Now there are mechanisms in place. There is a grievance mechanism now in place in the health sector. There is a hotline, right? You can call, and they have to respond. And this was one of the positive things that has happened during the last few years. So there can be a responsibility taken by the public in an organized way. And as we speak, some of the hospitals, and GMO knows this very well, some of the shortages of drugs and devices have been taken care of by local, business people, community. So that has really buffered the impact, the negative impact of these shortages. So they used to buy from the local pharmacies and supply the hospital pharmacy. We know of instances like that. So but that's not a sustainable solution. But at least in the interim, until we as a nation recover from this economic crisis, which is a created crisis, we take more responsibility collectively. Then also, in Sri Lanka, this is not from the public itself, but we need a charter on patients' rights and responsibilities. Many countries have that, because that specifies what are your rights. Because we have a free healthcare system, sometimes people think that we have to, just accept whatever is given by the health system. No, right. Informed consent is required. It's not just consent, signing a form, but do you really know what you are signing for, right? So like that, I think the patients need to be empowered. That's very important. So that has to be recognized by the health system. So within the next few months, can the parliament come up with this? We have drafts, and there had been sectoral oversight committees where we have made representations. Drafts of patients' rights and responsibilities been submitted. So if something like that can be enacted legally, I think that will also give a lot of confidence to the doctors as well, because there is an enlightened public holding ourselves, the system, accountable, and also the decision makers accountable. Right now, you can get away with anything, even if it leads to a death. We all, even the doctors can get away. There's hardly any medical negligence, cases filed and convictions in this country, and so we have to also, from the medical profession, really have a inward look at ourselves, and also be independent in our decision making process, not serve political interests or commercial interests. I think that's the responsibility of all professionals. Without that, I don't think this country can be saved from this economic crisis.
Health crisis also, Dr.
Yeah, which affects the health
crisis. So thank you very much, Dr. Vignani, the President of the Sri Lanka Medical Association, Professor Indika Karunatilaka, Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Academic Consortium for Public Health, Dr. Padma Gunaratne, past President of SLMA, Dr. Ashoka Gunaratne, Media Spokesperson of the Association of Medical Specialists, and Dr. Thinuwan Wickramasinghe, General Committee Member of the GMOA. Thank you very much, Shihar. Thank you very much, Nadeem, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. A modern health and social care system has to be completely focused on the needs of its users. Take care and good night.